Okay, moving on to the next segment of today's show, I wanted to talk a little bit about the Rutgers Scarlet Knights and the job that head coach Steve Pikell has done with this squad. And to give you guys a little bit of background, when the Big Ten expanded a couple years ago, everyone was really surprised at first when they decided to bring in Maryland and Rutgers. And we all know, they wanted to expand to the New York City market given the amount of Big Ten alumni that live in the New York area. And I totally understand. But the fact that they chose Rutgers was a very interesting move because historically, over the past 10 or so seasons before they got to the Big Ten, it's not like their football team or their basketball team was good in any way. Literally, the only reason why they decided to do that was because they wanted that New York media availability. And when you look at it, Rutgers last year was one of the most surprising teams in all of college basketball. And most people were surprised. I actually predicted Rutgers going into last year was going to finish pretty well, but I don't think anyone could have expected just how good Rutgers ended up being as they were in a position to make the NCAA tournament before the pandemic hit. And the thing about Rutgers last year was that they were like your prototypical 8 or 9 seed. They were winning games at home, which was very impressive. They could not really win games on the road. They weren't really the greatest three-point shooting team. But when you watched Rutgers, one thing really remained consistent, and that was that they played hard. And even before last year, when Steve Pikell first got to Rutgers, that was one thing I always really noticed. They played hard. And when you're a team like Rutgers, I feel like that's a big key. Rutgers is a very hard job. Rutgers, it's not like they have that much basketball history, and the job that Steve Pikell has done to change the culture of this program and to turn this team around is remarkable. This is now his 5th year as the head coach of Rutgers, and really each year since he's been there, the program has just improved. His first year, 15 and 18 overall. Second year, 15 and 19 overall. Next year, 14 and 17 overall, but that was the first time under Steve Pikell that Rutgers didn't finish last in the Big Ten. And then last year, with a nice returning group of guys, Rutgers finished their regular season 20 and 11 and were in a really good position to make it the NCAA tournament. But the thing about this year's Rutgers squad was this. Going into the season, we all knew how exactly the Big Ten was looking like in terms of difficulty. There are so many good teams in this league between Michigan State and Iowa and Illinois and Maryland, Minnesota, Indiana, Wisco, Purdue, Michigan. There are so many good teams in the Big Ten, and when you look at Rutgers, even though they did return most of their team, besides Akwase Yeboah, the former transfer from Stony Brook, who was a really helpful piece from last year's squad that was once again really good and would have made the NCAA tournament. But I do think going into this season for Rutgers, there were some questions. I had them as a top 20 team in the preseason. I believe I had them at 22. And I thought to start, that was a really good place for them because let's face the facts. Even though in college basketball, I love the idea of returning a team full of experienced guys that is very well coached and has the chemistry taken care of, and that's really what Rutgers should be this season. And when you watch Rutgers, that's really what they are now. They look like a team that plays really well together. They look like a team that's on the same page, and they look like a team that, most importantly, is very well coached. But I feel like a lot of times in the preseason during college basketball, we're a little too quick to make judgments with teams like Rutgers in the sense that, when you look at Rutgers' roster, they return Geo Baker, they return Miles Johnson and Ronnie Harper Jr. and Jacob Young and Montez Mathis, and they bring in the freshman Oscar Palmquist and Cliff Amori. Rutgers really should have been very good this year, especially when you look at what they were able to do last year. But at the same time, I feel like what a lot of people say is that, Rutgers peaked last year, and there's absolutely no way that they're going to be able to do what they did last year again, especially when you consider the fact that one of the reasons why last year Rutgers was so good was because of the hostile environment of the rack, and just how Rutgers was able to use that as a real home court advantage was pretty incredible. And I think they needed that when you play in such a tough league like the Big Ten. Last year, Rutgers was able to pick up some big-time quality wins at the rack. They picked up wins over Seton Hall by 20. They beat Penn State. They beat Indiana. They beat Minnesota. They beat Nebraska. They beat Purdue. They beat Northwestern, beat Illinois, beat Maryland. All of those games were at home. But the one concern for a lot of Rutgers fans were last year, Rutgers was not able to win on the road at all. Besides the last game of the season against Purdue, and once they won that game, that was really the big dub that ended up really clinching the NCAA tournament spot for them if it would have happened. But last year, every time Rutgers faced a good team on the road, the bottom line is they were not able to get the job done. Losing to Penn State, losing to Wisconsin, losing to Ohio State, losing to Maryland, losing to Iowa, losing to Illinois. They even lost a neutral court game to Michigan at Madison Square Garden. So Rutgers last year really was just not able to get the job done on the road. And so far this year, they have really proven the narrative of, okay, Rutgers, you were a really good story last year, but the bottom line is this. Number one, you're Rutgers. Number two, there were a lot of people saying, oh, Rutgers peaked last year, and as well as they played last year, is there any way that these guys could get better? How many pros does Rutgers have on their team? Where is the room for improvement? That was what a lot of people were saying going into this season. If you remember, it reminded a lot of people of the Northwestern 2017 team that made the NCAA tournament for the first time ever. They won a game against Vanderbilt and then ended up losing a very close game to Gonzaga. And if you remember, the following season, they had a lot of hype because they returned their whole team. A lot of people were just saying, oh, the program is all of a sudden on the rise, and they were awful. They were one of the most disappointing college basketball teams in recent memory. And the unfortunate thing for Rutgers was last year, it's not like they even had the opportunity to play in March Madness. And going into this season, I really hoped that Rutgers would be a much closer team to what they were last year compared to that 2018 Northwestern team that really disappointed. And the first thing is, Steve Pikell is an awesome coach. You could see that every time you watch Rutgers play, win or lose, his team is bought in and is ready to do whatever it takes to get the job done. And that's super, super impressive. Earlier in the season, Rutgers had some concern. I believe it was the first game against Sacred Heart when Geo Baker got hurt. And if you follow Rutgers, you know that over the past couple seasons, Geo Baker has been the heart and soul of this team. He's a senior now. I remember as a freshman, him and the former Rutgers guard Corey Sanders, I believe this was Pikell's second year at MSG, or at Rutgers, they go to MSG for the Big Ten tournament, and they win 2 games, including a stunning win over Indiana, and then competed with Purdue until the very end. The Boilers ended up winning that game, but still, it was like, okay, come on, it's Rutgers. It's not like even though they were competitive, it's not like they were going to be a team that all of a sudden was going to be on the rise. But the more time went on, you saw that Steve Pikell was really able to do a nice job bringing in as much talent, whether it's old talent or young talent, as possible. The 2017 recruiting class he brings in, Geo Baker, Miles Johnson, 2 guys that are currently on the team and serve a big-time role. Both of those guys were, 3-star recruits. The following year, he brings in Montez Mathis, 4-star recruit. He is a very big part of their current squad. Same with Ron Harper, and we're going to get to him in a little bit. The fact that this kid was unranked coming out of high school, ridiculous, because he could be the most gifted offensive player I've ever seen Rutgers have. And the bottom line is this, man, that dude is a baller. He is a pro. And watching him throughout the first couple games of this season has been really, really fun to watch. On the season, Ron Harper Jr. is averaging 24 points per game, 7 rebounds per game, 2.5 assists per game, and 60% from the field. He's done an awesome job really picking up the slack for Geo Baker when he got hurt. And it's not like Geo Baker has been bad, but at the same time, Geo Baker is the leader of that Rutgers squad. When he is not on the floor, you could kind of tell that Rutgers isn't necessarily the same team with the same gusto. And really, Ron Harper has done an awesome job taking that lead role and really being a scorer that Rutgers could rely on offensively. Because as good as Rutgers was last year, one of their main weaknesses was they will just get into offensive droughts sometimes, and they wouldn't really be able to score. And a lot of times they would win games just based on their toughness and physicality and the fact that they just wanted it more than everyone else and worked harder. But at the same time, I think when you look at this year's Rutgers squad, it's a little different in the sense that Ron Harper Jr. could really score the ball. Steve Pikell has also done a really nice job bringing in transfers like Jacob Young from Texas. He's a guy that before he got to Rutgers has played in the NCAA tournament in the Power 5 level. He's a very experienced player, and I think he could give Rutgers that kind of experience and the edge that they may need to win a tournament game or two once March Madness comes. And there were many people that going into the season had some questions about this Rutgers squad just because of the fact that last year they were so good at the rack, and this year, even though they're going to be playing their home games at the rack, there aren't going to be fans. Who knew if Rutgers could continue this home court advantage while playing at the rack, considering the fact that it wouldn't be full capacity and bonkers like it was basically all of last year. But when I look at this Rutgers squad, in a Big Ten conference that is tough. We all know how many good teams there are in this league. It could take a lot out of you. And the thing that I like about Rutgers is they come to play each and every night. They're competitive, and not every team in the Big Ten is going to be able to do that. And in a sport where everyone loves to go nuts over how good freshmen are, it's the teams like Rutgers who have experienced players that have been through the battles, that have been through the wars, that I think could be really successful in the COVID college basketball season, because there are just going to be so many obstacles each and every team are going to have to deal with. And when you look at Rutgers, there were a lot of people that were skeptical going into the season. Rutgers was awful on the road, and people weren't sure that their home court edge would be the same without the fans. And there were a lot of people that were curious whether they would be able to score consistently. And the thing about Rutgers is that this past week, they went at Maryland, and I understand Maryland is a team that isn't very good. I picked them to finish at the bottom of the Big Ten, but they are still a team that's very talented. And when you go on the road in Big Ten conference play, especially when you're Rutgers and you couldn't really win a Big Ten road game last year, the fact that early in the Big Ten season you go on the road to Maryland and get a nice win after being down at the half, that's a really good job by this Rutgers team, and that shows me toughness. And when I look at the rest of the Big Ten right now, I understand Iowa's really good. They lost to Gonzaga, but everyone's in love with them, and I think most people would expect Iowa to be the number one team in the Big Ten. You have Illinois, you have Wisconsin, Michigan State lost to Northwestern, but prior to last night, they were looking pretty good. I think Rutgers is right in the mix to win a Big Ten title. They're 6-0, and when you look at Rutgers, they are number 12 in my top 25, and I even considered putting them higher. And if they keep winning, they're going to be moving up and up and up. The fact that they've been able to be 6-0 without Geo Baker at full strength is just such a testament to Steve Pikell and the job that he's done so far this season. And I watched them against Maryland. They didn't play their greatest game, but turned it up in the second half and still somehow, some way found a way to win. And that is exactly what good teams do. And Rutgers has a lot of depth. Cliff Amori, the freshman, was hurt early in the second half against Illinois. And he's not hurt too badly, so he's going to be a guy that hopefully will be back and be ready to contribute. But at the same time, Rutgers is a team that I think is a legitimate Big Ten contender and has made significant strides, especially on the offensive side of the ball. So Steve Pikell, a coach that is really known for pounding nails, as John Rothstein likes to say, and playing tough, hard-nosed, gritty defense. But at the same time, when you combine that attitude, that makeup of Rutgers, and the fact that offensively with Harper and Geo Baker, who's played well but isn't even at 100% yet, this Rutgers team has a chance to be scary, scary good.